ख़वातीन व हज़रात, वेलकम बैक टू थॉट बिहाइंड थिंग्स। आज नए साल की पहली एपिसोड विद अली इलियास सर। कैसे हैं आप? हाउ आर यू? वेलकम बैक टू द शो।
An interesting year.
इट इज़ एन इंटरेस्टिंग ईयर, होपफुली अ गुड ईयर। सो अली, आज मैंने एक बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग टॉपिक रखा हुआ है आपके लिए। हैव यू एवर बीन इन अ रिलेशनशिप?
Yes. In
Okay.
the past, yes.
मुझे बड़े लोग मैसेज करते हैं, ठीक है। जनरली आई हैव पर्सनली ऑलवेज बीन इन 2 relationships, वन विद माई वाइफ एंड वन बिफोर दैट। जो मुझे लोग बहुत ज़्यादा मैसेज करते हैं, कहते हैं कि मुज़म्मिल भाई, यू नो, हार्ट ब्रेक एंड ladies left and boys left and you know like मैं बहुत ज़्यादा लड़के को या लड़की को पसंद करती हूँ, बट वो लिफ्ट नहीं कराता टाइप्स। एंड आई फील लाइक और सब कॉन्टिनेंटल कल्चर्स के अंदर लव इज़ अ वेरी 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 बिग थिंग।
इजाज़त नहीं है।
हमारे इजाज़त नहीं है, एंड आई थिंक दैट्स व्हाई इट्स अ बिट कंफ्यूजिंग सा है ना। इट्स ऑल्सो रोमांटिसाइज्ड। हमारी फिल्में सिर्फ लव के बारे में होती है, हमारे ड्रामे सिर्फ लव के बारे में होते हैं, लेकिन हमारे
हो जाता है।
हाँ, और हमारे घर वाले कहते हैं कि बेटा ये सब देख लो, लेकिन एक्चुअली लव शव कुछ नहीं होता, यू नो। सो इट्स वेरी वियर्ड, यू गेट लाइक अ कंफ्यूज्ड ऑडियंस जो आपको फिर हमारी उसमें नज़र भी आती है। और मैं देखता हूँ कि हमारे 15 से 25 साल के दरमियान के जो बच्चे होते हैं, वो उनकी ज़िंदगियों में बस लव ही चल रहा होता है। वो जब लव हासिल कर लेते हैं, उसके बाद वो सोचते हैं कि अच्छा मैंने क्या प्रोडक्टिव करना है, वगैरह 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 सारा कुछ। एंड लॉट ऑफ टाइम्स वो उस पॉइंट तक नहीं पहुँच पाते बिकॉज दे फेस अ सर्टन लॉस, और उसकी वजह से दे आर नॉट एबल टू डील विद इट इन अ वे कि मैं बहुत सारे ऐसे लोगों को जानता हूँ जो कि
Absolutely.
broke up with a girl or broke up with a boy and just got stuck there. और वो आज तक they're sabotaging their relationships, they're doing this, they're doing that. और essentially what they're doing is कि back of the mind में उन्होंने वो एक पुरानी relationship थी जिसको उन्होंने perfect consider कर लिया हुआ था, और वो आज तक उस हर बंदे को उसके हिसाब से scale कर रहे हैं, you know. So there are a lot of problems. जब आप relationships की बात करते हैं, आप love की बात करते हैं, बहुत सारे साइकोलॉजिकल इश्यूज भी हैं और बहुत सारी वो चीज़ें भी हैं। बट आई स्टार्ट ऑफ द कॉन्वर्जेशन विद समथिंग वेरी वेरी सिंपल। व्हाट इफ़ यू हैव अ ब्रेकअप, ठीक है, और जब आपका ब्रेकअप होता है फॉर थ्रू नो फॉल्ट ऑफ योर ओन, अभी हम उस साइड पे जाते हैं, थ्रू नो फॉल्ट ऑफ योर डंप हो गया
and everything.
अभी, हाँ, मतलब अभी आपने जो ना फैमिली वगैरह का हो गया, या आपका फैमिली तक भी नहीं पहुंचा, आप छोटे हो, आप ओ लेवल्स में हो, और क्यूट सी आपकी एक रिलेशनशिप है, और आपको एक दिन रात को मैसेज आता है कि आई डोंट थिंक इट्स वर्किंग आउट, ओके अल्लाह। अब आप कह रहे हो कि यार मेरी तो दुनिया ही ख़त्म हो गई, मेरी तो ज़िंदगी ही यहाँ पर रुक गई, यू नो, आई एम नेवर गोना बी हैप्पी अगेन। सो हाउ डू यू डील विद दैट सॉर्ट ऑफ लॉस, बिकॉज इट डज अगेन, इसके अंदर फर्दर बहुत थीम्स आती हैं जिसमें आप एकदम सेल्फ स्टीम आपकी तबाह हो जाती है, आपको लगता है कि यू आर नॉट नो गुड, देयर इज़ अ वेरी हाई चांस ऑफ यू गोइंग इन अ स्पायरल बिकॉज ऑफ सेल्फ वर्थ कोई नहीं होती, तो आप फिर रखे, एंड देन फिर आपकी आगे टॉक्सिक रिलेशनशिप्स भी आती हैं, तो यू लिव विद इट बिकॉज यू जस्ट लाइक आई डिजर्व दिस। So बहुत सारा कुछ मैंने बोल दिया है, but
there's a patient of mine who put it really beautifully. I think the way she put it is better than anything that I could say. She said that grief is the pain that you feel grief is the price that you pay for love.
बड़ी कोई sadistic सी बात है।
Sadistic?
sadistic नहीं है, बट बड़ी डिप्रेसिंग सी बात है कि आपको अगर लव आ रहा है तो ग्रीफ आएगा ही आएगा।
और मेरी मतलब I think she put it really well, and I'll tell you why I think she put it really really well. क्योंकि मेरे ख्याल से for the longest time एरिक एरिक्सन एक बहुत फेमस थिंकर थे, उन्होंने ना ये जो टाइम पीरियड था ना, दिस टाइम स्पैन ऑफ एज स्पैन दैट यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट, इसको उन्होंने कहा था कि दिस इज़ द टाइम स्पैन वेयर वी आर फिगरिंग आउट इंटिमेसी वर्सेस आइसोलेशन, whether we move towards becoming intimate with others around us or a significant other, or we move towards becoming completely isolated. So ये बहुत I think एक peculiar time होता है जिस अभी मैं भी गुजर रहा हूँ, obviously because that's my age bracket as well, जिसमें आप बस यही समझने की कोशिश कर रहे होते हैं on how to deal with love and then how to deal with loss, because love obviously does entail a lot of loss.
Yeah.
Actually, and I want to read something towards the end today. मुझे अभी ख्याल आया. Remind me, before you end, I would like to read something today that really summarizes it perfectly. So I think definitely if you've been in love, and I don't just mean romantic relationships, generally, you know, if you love your friends, you love your family, at some point you're going to experience some sort of loss. मतलब बहुत मुश्किल है कि आप ज़िंदगी से गुजरें till an older age and you haven't been through any sort of loss, whether that's through death or that's through the end of a relationship, someone breaking up with you, you go through some sort of loss. और जब आप उस loss से गुजरते हैं, it's the most natural thing in the world कि आप pain experience करेंगे. It's the most natural thing in the world कि you're going to be sad, you're going to be upset. I have people जो मुझे भी कभी कभार मैसेज करते हैं on my page कि I had a breakup and now I've been very upset for the past 2 days or 5 days. How do I stop being upset? Yeah, your tears, your sadness is proof of how much you cared. If you didn't care, you'd probably be fine.
Right.
So the only way to have absolutely nothing happen to you emotionally at the end of the relationship is if you can go back in time and get yourself to not care. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So yes, grief is the price that we pay for love. 100%. Kyunki what is grief? Grief is sort of like an internal proof. In my head, at least, grief is sort of an internal proof that I cared.
Yeah.
He or she mattered to me, whoever that person may be. So yeah. And I don't think it's depressing. I think it's beautiful.
Acha.
Because I think that
it's again it's grief is an emotion, and it's not essentially a bad emotion.
Yeah.
It's an emotion just like any other emotion.
Yeah. It's definitely it's a process.
तो मैंने तो उसको थोड़ा demonize कर दिया ना. It's so depressing, but it's not. You're right. But so मैं एक ना तस्वीर कशी करता हूँ. मैं एक 17 साल का लड़का हूँ. नहीं, थोड़ा सा मैं मैच्योर हो गया अब. मैं 23 साल का लड़का हूँ और कॉलेज का आखिरी साल है. 4 साल मैंने एक लड़की के साथ गुजारे और मुझे एक दिन पता लगा कि जी उसकी शादी होगी उसके कज़न के साथ.
Yes.
You know, and now I'm like what like my entire life was a lie. How do I deal with it?
I don't know.
Thank you so much for watching us.
I don't know, because obviously, like, when you say how do I deal with it, right? Does that mean how do I stop feeling this way?
मैं तो वो ना आपका क्या कहते हैं
Springboard हूँ.
नहीं, मैं आपका ना वो क्लाइंट हूँ. अली भाई छोड़ गई मुझे वो. अली भाई मैं क्या करूँ?
इसलिए मैं यही पूछूंगा ना कि डील विद इट करने का क्या मतलब होगा.
पता नहीं अली भाई, कुछ समझ नहीं आ रही, भूख नहीं लगती, सोया नहीं जाता, बस पड़ा रहता हूँ पूरी रात बैठकर. आप एक भाई हैं, उनकी पॉडकास्ट सुनता रहता हूँ.
That was a nice fix. यार honestly I think that's the most natural thing in the world. अब अगर एक ऐसी सिचुएशन है जिसमें आपके पास कोई कंट्रोल नहीं है, आपके पास literally अगर कोई कंट्रोल नहीं है, and the person that you were with for such a long time for whatever reasons, अब वो relationship ख़त्म हो गई है, they're with someone else, it's hard, it's heartbreaking, it's very difficult. But there is no pill out there, there is no technique out there, there is no meditation out there that will make sure that the pain never comes. The only thing you have control over is how you're going to deal with that pain. And and just to be clear, like, this isn't something that I feel I've even fully figured out as a person. It's something that you're constantly learning. ऐसा कभी भी नहीं होता. Even when I read great thinkers around in their 60s and 70s and 80s, और उन्होंने कोई बहुत बड़ा लॉस एक्सपीरियंस किया होता है, ऐसा नहीं होता कि वो उस लॉस का उनके ऊपर कोई इम्पैक्ट नहीं होता क्योंकि उन्होंने पता नहीं कितनी डेथ्स देखी होती हैं, उन्होंने पता नहीं कितने ब्रेकअप्स देखे होते हैं. Doesn't work like that, right? The only matter of choice that you have in this situation is how you're going to deal with the emotional impact of what just happened to you.
Right.
That's about it. And how you deal with that is going to be really important also for your future relationships.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing as well. Right?
Yeah.
Like, because so many people I see who, जो मैंने पहले भी तस्करा किया कि जो कि अपनी पहली रिलेशनशिप या जो सबसे अच्छी रिलेशनशिप है उसके साथ तोलते हैं वो आगे वाली सारी रिलेशनशिप्स, एंड देन फॉर द लॉन्गेस्ट टाइम आई सी देम वेरी सेल्फ सबोटाजिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ गेटिंग इनटू एनीथिंग लॉन्ग टर्म और गेटिंग इनटू एनीथिंग दैट विल इंश्योर देयर हैप्पीनेस बट दे डोंट डू इट. मैं एक और सिचुएशन बिल्ड करता हूँ. मैं 6 साल से किसी के साथ हूँ और मैंने अपनी पूरी ज़िंदगी उनके साथ लिख ली है. मैंने कर दिया कि यार मेरे बच्चों के नाम क्या होंगे, हम एग्जैक्टली करेंगे क्या, वो ये पढ़ रहा है, मैं ये पढ़ रही हूँ, हम किस तरह रहेंगे, हम क्या जॉब्स करें, सब कुछ सोच लिया मैंने. होता है ना बंदा इस तरह सोचता है.
बिल्कुल.
And then for one reason or the other, now we're not together anymore. ठीक है, 1 week from our breakup, and I'm just thinking, the life that I had thought about and मैं एक redundant cycle में था या थी because of that, क्योंकि बड़ा secure था ना मैं 6 साल. तो अब मैं अगर एकदम से चेंज कर रहा हूँ, how do I go about it? I'm a very
क्या चेंज कर रहा हूँ?
अपनी पूरी लाइफस्टाइल, लाइफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ लाइफ. एंड मैंने इस तस्वीर खींची है, मैंने कहा कि यार बंदा जो है वो या बंदी जो है वो बड़ी सेल्फ अवेयर है. सो देर जस्ट लाइक के ठीक है, हैव टू डील विद इट. सो नॉट वेरी लाइक कि ज़िंदगी तबाह हो गई, ख़त्म हो गया, बट हैव टू डील विद इट in a mature way, but don't know how to. So how do I go about reimagining my life?
One day at a time.
Okay.
I think that यार ये जो हमारा productivity culture है ना, and just this culture of just this toxic positivity culture that you see a lot on social media these days.
Yeah.
There's a lot of motivational content out there, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if I spoke about this with you before. मुझे ना एक बार मैं जगह पे बोलने गया तो someone introduced me as a motivational speaker.
अच्छा.
और मज़े की बात यह है कि my first 5 minutes were about to be about why motivation isn't really productive. Right? So then I corrected them. So I think just connecting that culture with what you said, kabhi, we imagine that we just sort of have to get our life in order immediately.
Yeah.
I think take your time.
Yeah.
It's okay to just take your time. There's no hurry. I mean, you spent 6 years with this person and that sucks. And you're probably going through a difficult time, which also sucks. But from what you're telling me, this person is self-aware and ko pata hai ki I have to rebuild it now. Just one day at a time. And this isn't even me speaking as a therapist. It's just me speaking as a person who reads a lot on these things.
Yeah.
I think this is just something that really requires a lot of time for you to, पहले तो ना I think आपको understand करना पड़ता है ना कि आपने जो internal images बनाए होते हैं कि this is how many kids we're gonna have, this is where we're gonna live, ये उनके नाम होंगे, ये उनके जानवरों के नाम होंगे. तो आपका एक जो possible future है वो shatter हो चुका होता है. And that's a form of grief as well, right? Because you've lost the possibility of a certain future with someone.
Right.
So just like any other form of grief, it's something that you really, really have to take time to build. And I think if there was one thing that I really would want to become good at and would want to help people become good at, it would be just allowing yourself to sit with certain emotions for long periods of time. क्योंकि कभी कभार हमारी बस यही कोशिश होती है, अच्छा हो गया, productivity oriented, अच्छा आगे कैसे गुजरना है, how do I go right, how do I go left, how do I do this, how do I do, just relax, just take a few days, just experience whatever it is that you need to experience. महसूस करें यार, क्योंकि जब तक आप महसूस नहीं करेंगे आपको पता नहीं चलेगा कि क्या होगा, तो फिर maybe you're not going to be able to figure out how to prevent it from happening next time.
Yeah. And वो productivity वाली बात आपने बड़ी interesting की ना कि you don't have to read that article about this guy left his job and became a billionaire type situation, because that's just one guy and I don't even know whether that's true or not on the internet. But what I do know is कि मैं अगर constantly इस रट में फंसा रहूँगा कि I need to be better, so I'm probably not going to get better, rather than कि अगर मैं अपना कुछ time लगाऊँ and just work on myself and be mentally relaxed and stable and सारा कुछ, and then when I'm there then I start thinking about कि अच्छा मैं बिल्कुल फारिग हूँ, मैं बोर भी हो रहा हूँ, तो अब मैं अपना कुछ productive ढूंढता हूँ. That is probably a more mature.
A great man once said that life is not a problem to be solved but something to be experienced.
Interesting.
And I feel like that's how we need to look at emotions too. They're not something to be solved, maybe resolved at times, but not something to be solved. Just something जिसको हमें experience करने की ज़रूरत होती है. So we can just, and that's how you sort of need to slow down in life as well. I think if there's one big thing that I've learned this year, it's the importance of slowing down. कि आप एक जगह पे बैठें, keep like this thing away from you, and you just sit on the side, and you appreciate all the voices and the noises around you. You know, अगर आप nature में बैठे हैं, the trees, the birds, the sunlight on your skin. If you're bare feet, then the grass on your feet. Experiencing all of that, I think this is one thing जो कि मैंने बहुत सीखी है इस साल, and it's something that's really really helped me. And that's मतलब हम इनको बहुत मुख्तलिफ नाम देते हैं, mindfulness, meditation, this and that. Really, you're just sitting with yourself. And I think increasingly we're becoming worse and worse at this thing, sitting with ourselves, because I'm constantly distractions mein. We shift from our phone to our laptop, to our books, to the other people. Matlab, to everyone watching, you know, ask yourself, when was the last time जब आपने सिर्फ 5 मिनट बैठ के कुछ भी नहीं किया था? You weren't waiting for anything. You weren't waiting in some sort of line. आप किसी waiting room में नहीं बैठे हुए थे किसी डॉक्टर के लिए. That doesn't count. I mean, एक्टिवली आप बैठे और आपने कहा कि मैं सिर्फ 5 या 10 मिनट के लिए अपने साथ बैठूंगा या बैठूंगी. When was the last time you did that? And I'm going to say for most people, they'd have a hard time remembering one.
Yeah.
Because they probably haven't done it in a very long time.
Yeah.
That's so important.
Absolutely. Laws को मैं थोड़ा सा expand करूँगा. एक और
laws को मैं भी थोड़ा सा expand करूँगा.
चलें आप पहले expand कर लें फिर मैं आऊँगा.
I want to read this one thing that I really really like. So C.S. Lewis, जिन्होंने नार्निया लिखा था, he had a wonderful book called A Grief Observed. 64 pages की book है. And I think it's C.S. Lewis wasn't like a therapist or something like that. He was definitely a philosopher, a novelist. He was a great thinker. But this one book that he wrote, A Grief Observed, he married a woman. I think उनकी 4 साल शादी रही थी, and then she passed away from cancer.
अच्छा.
The book is him going through grief. It's written from right after his wife passed away, and it's written grief के through वो जैसे जैसे गुजर रहा है ना, तो how he goes through the process of grief. It's 64 pages. And उसके अंदर जो insights हैं, they're absolutely beautiful. And there's one thing that I would particularly like to read from that book, अगर मुझे मिल जाए. One second. Yeah, there we go. So, grief is like a bomber, circling round and dropping its bombs each time the circle brings its overhead. Physical pain is like the steady barrage on a trench in World War I. Hours of it, with no let-up for a moment. Thought is never static, pain often is. What sort of a lover am I to think so much about my affliction and so much less about hers? Even the insane call, come back, is all for my own sake. I never even raised the question whether such a return, if it were possible, would be good for her. I want her back as an ingredient in the restoration of my past. Could I have wished for anything worse? Having gotten once through death to come back and then, at some later date, have all her dying to do all over again.
Interesting.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is.
मतलब अगर हम loss की बात कर रहे हैं, when someone experiences death, you lose a parent or you lose, anyone. I mean, I think that's the one thing that, people just want somehow to bring them back. I really like this page in particular because I think this is later on in the book, बीच से आगे जाके कहीं आता है, and उसमें you can see that he is now coming to terms with his grief. At some level, he's coming to terms with his grief when he wrote this. And I just thought that it was so beautiful. So that's how I wanted to expand on loss.
Yeah, and बड़ा interesting है because मैं खुद जो अब expand करने लगा था वो मैं relationship loss से ज़्यादा passing away of a loved one के ऊपर आ रहा था. And I know for a fact a lot of people would have read that. You have obviously have an understanding, a particular understanding of literature and what that means. So I would like you to expand on that directly as well. But what if you lose someone, particularly COVID के time के ऊपर बहुत सारे लोगों के parents की death हुई, बहुत करीबी रिश्तेदारों की death हुई, grandparents, uncles, aunts, सारा कुछ. For them, जो sudden loss था, because a lot of times what happened was people were in their 50s. You don't really have that mentality where
they're going to pass away.
They're going to pass away. To be very honest, in the modern world, even 60s is not that number. 70s ke upar jaakar chalo, there's that question mark. So for obviously a lot of people right now, post-COVID, are shocked and they still haven't gotten over it. Yes, there is enough media out there to say, okay, listen, whatever you're going through, a lot of other people are going through as well, so just be normal. But they haven't really been able to deal with it. Just that one simple thing, it's okay, fine, a lot of people are going through it, but what about me? Me and my relationship with that person, and the person had to go away in such terrible circumstances. And I know for a fact that a lot of times a lot of people die peacefully, and लोगों को होता है ना कि मैं बहुत ज़्यादा I do think about death a lot. People just generally are averse to dying. There's a fear of dying. But मुझे जब मैं सोचता हूँ तो मुझे होता है कि it's a very logical. मैं personally जो अपने बारे में सोचता हूँ, obviously people who I love उनके बारे में मैं नहीं सोचता, but अपने बारे में सोचता मुझे होता है कि it's a very logical next step in the grand. If you're a spiritual person, and if you believe in the grand plan, this is just a transition, right? The only thing probably that I think about is you pass away peacefully. होता है ना कभी बार कि this person passed away in their sleep and it was very peaceful, or they passed away naturally in
it's a blessing.
These circumstances. And then there are people who pass away in the most excruciating of ways. I remember, and again, loss ही होता है. My cat passed away this one time. I was out and my brother was visiting Pakistan, and he बिल्लियों का होता है ना कि घर से बाहर जाने का बहुत शौक होता है, तो वो बिल्ला था, तो उसको रात को उस तरह था. He went, and my brother was like, he went out and he tried to bring him back but couldn't, and then eventually locked the door. The next morning I returned, and they couldn't find the cat. We were supposed to go out for breakfast, and then मैं पूरी गलियों में घूमता रहा. मुझे एक जगह पर नजर आया. आज तक मैंने वो एक डब्बे में डाला हुआ है. मुझे ऑनेस्टली मैं पहली दफ़ा ज़िंदगी में उसके बारे में बात कर रहा हूँ. बट मैं गया 2-3 घर छोड़ के, तो वो एक पड़ा हुआ था. दिस लाइक बिग कैट एंड वेरी एग्रेसिव, एंड वो सारा का सारा विद स्ट्रेंजर्स. वो पड़ा हुआ है, वो बस मियाँ मियाँ कर रहा. मैंने करीब आके देखा तो मैंने देखा कि कुत्तों ने उसको अटैक किया हुआ था, एंड ही वाज जस्ट लाइक,
oh my god,
बिल्कुल बहुत बुरी हालत में था. Took him to the vet immediately. 3 days he was there constantly. उसको जो है ना वो sepsis and God knows क्या सारी चीज़ें थी. And then we took him to another vet, and then the last moment उसका ये था कि वो तड़प रहा था, और मैंने उसको बोला, I was there and my sister was there, and I told the doctor, listen, just put him down. And just to watch him
be put down.
Be
must
put
have been
down.
so difficult.
I've never experienced that. I don't know कि अगर मैं किसी इंसान के साथ वो experience करूँ तो क्या होगा मेरे साथ. That was just still like a pet. So how does one deal with that imagery? जिस मैं अभी बोल रहा हूँ आपको कि मेरे लिए वो imagery ना, मैंने आज तक उसको ये किया कि मैंने imagery side पे रखी.
And I can see even when you're talking about it, it's bringing up a lot.
So when that imagery comes back, what do you do?
First of all, thank you for sharing that, man. That sounds like a horrible way to. I mean, that's not easy to see, na?
Yeah.
I think जब ऐसा कुछ होता है ना, I would wonder if that. I mean, it sounds like that was a traumatic event for you.
Yeah.
So then we move into an entirely different area of working with trauma. Because जब आपको, does that image come up often?
Yeah, it doesn't. So because the reason why
you don't talk about it.
Because I don't talk about it, and I purposely. So the minute उसका mention होता है या कुछ होता है ना, तो मैं अपने दिमाग को बंद कर लेता हूँ. Like that's a defense mechanism जो कि that day till date मैंने रखा हुआ है. क्योंकि वो image, I can't deal with the image basically.
I remember once मेरी training के दौरान there was someone who came in whose father had died in a bomb blast, and this individual was not speaking. I think 3 दिन हो गए थे कि this person was not speaking at all. And it's one thing to lose someone and go through grief. It's another thing to lose someone in such a traumatic way and then go through grief plus trauma. Right? I mean, grief doesn't necessarily always have to be traumatic.
Yeah.
It can be. और वो जब traumatic grief बन जाती है, then the method of dealing with it is completely different. It's a long-term process क्योंकि आपने trauma के साथ बहुत ज़्यादा काम करना होता है. And something that you said earlier that I want to expand on as a concluding, I think we can move towards a concluding remark on this, कि आपको खुद अपनी मौत का एहसास होना शुरू हो जाता है, आपको अपनी mortality का एहसास होना शुरू हो जाता है when you lose someone or something close to you. So my favorite writers and one of my favorite thinkers in psychotherapy, Irvin Yalom, वो एक बड़ी he has this concept of death anxiety. He believes कि हर इंसान death anxiety experience करता है. तो when we lose someone who's very close to us, तो हमारी internal death anxiety को trigger कर देता है. Because that's an event that triggers your thoughts of your own loss of mortality, कि हम लोग इंसान हैं, हम पूरी ज़िंदगी इस दुनिया पे नहीं रहेंगे. And मैं जब he wrote a book on death anxiety. It's called Staring at the Sun, because he says thinking about death is a lot like staring at the sun. You can't do it for too long.
Yeah.
So usme na, in reading that, I started exploring my own for a bit, and I just realized मिसाल के तौर पे कि अगर मैं किताब खरीदता हूँ और उसमें मैं नाम, टाइम, डेट कहाँ से लिया ये चीज़ें लिख रहा हूँ, that's me attempting to freeze that moment in time. Right? Because I have a hard time letting it go. But another great thing about working through death anxiety is that you can have a much more enriched life. आपको समझ में आ सकती है कि
much more what?
Enriched life.
Right.
कि आप once you realize truly कि आप mortal हैं. Because a lot of us don't. Yeah. Because a lot of us don't. It takes a lot for you to realize that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's not something that we naturally realize, because अगर हम हर वक्त इस चीज़ का हमें एहसास हो, people would go crazy.
Yeah.
So I think when you really realize that, you start reevaluating your life. आप reassess करना शुरू कर देते हैं चीज़ें. You start realizing कि अच्छा इस चीज़ पे मुझे focus करने की ज़रूरत है, ये मेरी priorities हैं. I need to reprioritize family or these friends or these people that I care about. मैं अपनी ज़िंदगी में you let go of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Once you work through that.
And a lot of things that you take for granted, for example, आप उनको फिर seriously लेना शुरू कर देते हैं.
Yeah, but in short, my answer would be that therapy, because when your grief is mixed with a bunch of trauma as well, because जब इस किस्म की death होती है, the bomb blast or the way that your cat passed away, so that has the potential to be a traumatizing incident for someone. कुछ लोगों के लिए शायद वो incident traumatizing हो, कुछ लोगों के लिए ना हो, लेकिन in the long run, therapy is something that really, really helps with that. It helps you uncover the grief, helps you realize what that grief meant, helps you realize your own death anxiety. किस तरह से मेरी death anxiety कहाँ से आ रही है, मुझे किन चीज़ों पे focus करने की ज़रूरत है. And I think that is probably one of the best times to be entering therapy as well.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. We're just hitting the 30-minute mark, so we're just going to end this here. Ali, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
And for you guys for watching, thank you so much. This was Muzamil Hasan Zaidi. You were watching Thought Behind Things. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.